what's up and welcome back to Interpreting the Stars, where today I'm talking about a movie that has taken forever to come around, but it's finally on digital today. It's the last film to take place in the Fox universe of X-Men films. It's The New Mutants. This, of course, was initially supposed to come out in April of 2018. It is now November of 2020. Obviously, the film went through numerous delays for whatever reason, the latest of which was all due to our glorious coronavirus. It's just been a mess all around. That being said, I went into this thing as soon as I could, even though it hasn't gotten a lot of love. So it's time to find out if I'll enjoy this final X-Men-esque film, or if I'll reprove it. Let's get cracking. This review was brought to you by the word of the day, reprove, to express disapproval of. The New Mutants focuses on Danielle Moonstar and a group of other young mutants that are being held in a hospital by Dr. Reyes to hone in on their abilities, which they may be unfamiliar with. New Mutants are volatile because they don't know their own strength and have difficulty controlling their abilities, but with the help of Dr. Reyes and her fellow New Mutants, Danielle works on finding out what she can do and what that means for this mysterious hospital. I've always been a bit infamous when it came down to my praise for anything X-Men related, even the sort of spin-offs that they've had now and then. The New Mutants is definitely a spin-off. It goes beyond the fact that I'm a fan of superheroes in general. I just think that the world of X-Men has always been interesting. The concept of these superpowers coming to these individuals through evolution and mutation is great. That's often why I praise certain films in the universe that aren't always seen as fantastic. I was always a huge fan of X-Men The Last Stand. I quite enjoyed X-Men Apocalypse, and I actually was fine with X-Men Dark Phoenix. 3 of the most hated X-Men films out there. I had a good enough time with each of them for different reasons. The only X-Men film that I can think of that I wasn't a huge fan of was X-Men Origins Wolverine, which was just kind of a sloppy film all around. Based on what I've heard about this movie for a long time, I was weary that what I'd run into was garbage. My overall feelings, though, is that the movie's fine. It doesn't immediately stand out to me as this horrible, messy thing. At the same time, though, it doesn't stand out to me as a great film either. It's somewhere in between where I appreciated bits and pieces of it and was indifferent on a majority of everything else. The first positive dimension here has got to be these characters. I won't just sit here and say that they're as good as the X-Men Legacy characters we all kind of grew up with or anything, but they're not bad. I actually really liked them and thought they had decent chemistry with one another, especially in the moments of the film that felt like a fun coming-of-age dramedy. More about that in a second. Some of their abilities are really unique and different. Some felt like they were kind of the same things we've seen before. And there's a decent enough mystery at the heart of this movie that I think an audience can be pretty invested in. There's connections here and there that this film makes with previous films in the universe that are actually pretty cool to see as well. But I feel like this movie runs into more issues than not. The first problem that I had while watching is that it kind of felt wishy-washy. I'm not entirely sure what that word means, but it feels appropriate for this movie, which just didn't feel like it knew what it wanted to be. I had mentioned before that it has these moments where the kids hang out, they have fun, it feels like a fun coming-of-age dramedy, and then it'll switch around at the drop of a hat and be all dark thriller and horror, and these two things felt at odds with one another. I think all the lighthearted coming-of-age stuff watered down any kind of building suspense they could have had, which would have made the horror stuff stand out as pretty good. And I think the horror stuff watered down the effectiveness of the coming-of-age stuff. I just wanted them to pick one and stick with it. Another issue that I ran into this film is that I had trouble picking apart what the movie's plot even was. All these kids find themselves in this mysterious hospital being told they're all mutants and they'll all need to hone their abilities before they can go to the next step. But the hospital may not be as innocent as it appears, and that's fine. But when that happens, they needed to focus on these characters setting up a plan to escape, if that's what they wanted to do. Instead, most of them sort of accept their predicament. Some keep to themselves, some rebel, some are sarcastic, but nobody's really trying to do anything about where they are or find out what's going on or anything. In that respect, it's rather aimless. Again, the best thing about this movie is the characters, their development, and their chemistry with one another. In some respects, that's actually where this film keeps its head out of the water. Some of the visuals are also really good, but honestly, that writing in this movie is not doing it any favors. Let's go ahead and break down the final score for a second. From an unbiased technical vantage point, I think the movie did a fine job in certain areas like visuals and character development, which I had already previously mentioned, but the writing in general did lower this score to about 72%. meaning it's nothing horrible, it's fairly decent, but it's not all it could have been. My personal bias score, on the other hand, is much, much lower at 52% because even though I wasn't expecting much out of the movie, I still felt disappointed because this was a story that lacked in purpose for me. I didn't get why a lot of this stuff was happening. Averaging out the two scores together, we come to the final rating of 62%, 62 out of 100 possible stars, coming to a final letter grade of D. The good news is that it passes. The bad news is that it doesn't pass by much. It's basically hanging on by a thread. There were moments here and there that I felt like a slight tweaking or a couple extra days in the writer's room could have easily made the movie miles better. But it is what it is. I guess the biggest thing that I can appreciate is that it's finally out and we no longer have to wonder if we'll live to see if this movie gets released, because it's now out. Take that as you will and let me know your thoughts on the New Mutants in the comments section down below. Are you familiar with the source material here? I know I'm not, and maybe that's my problem. Maybe not. You let me know. As for YouTube, you guys know what to do. Hit the thumbs up, subscribe button, and bell to be notified when I come out with my next review. And until then, peace out.
Dave examines movies we just watch for fun. Davey is the expert. He is the #1 critic that I go to when I need a movie pick. Thanks for joining up with us.